great to be here with my good friend David McCallum. Hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, very well. I love that haircut.
Thanks, just coming out of lockdown, had to get a wee bit taken off, so
right.
Not much left to get taken off mine.
And we were speaking earlier, and you've just changed your, not so much what you do there, but your role, isn't it, at Rangers now? Is it professional phase manager at the academy?
Yeah, well, there's been a slight rewording, a rebranding of some of the kind of positions within the club, and with that obviously brings slightly different job roles as well. From my own point of view, I was the head of the senior academy, as the title was at that time. Now it's changed to the professional development phase. So again, I head up that phase, which is good. Still kind of you're working with the 18s players on a daily basis, and with a new coach coming to work with us in that era, Cameron Campbell.
Yeah.
Still overseeing the under 16s, which is again another part of my role which existed from last season anyway. The biggest addition to my role for the season ahead is working with the UEFA Youth League squad.
Okay.
Fortunately, we've managed to qualify for that programme again for the year ahead. I know how beneficial that was for not only the players from last season, but all the staff that were involved in as well. The exposure to competitive European Games programmes, which is brilliant for MD's development. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well, Donald.
Just before we go back and talk about your own, how you got into football and who influenced you, how important do you think that has been, or is it for young players to continue play at the highest level they can? We're talking about the Rangers at the Youth League playing in Europe. How important do you think it is for them to challenge themselves all the time?
Yeah, I think there's different types of challenges, Donald. I think that's probably the key thing. We'll look at our games programme within the club and you'll look at certain games being ones that will be more challenging than others. I think that's natural. And there'll be different types of challenges within that. So we can challenge the players by playing them up a year group, if that's the right thing to do for the individuals. The team, in terms of challenges, it might come within certain games that you get within the domestic programme. But playing the European programme, we've obviously had that now right through the academy, albeit it might be tournaments that we go to or friendly games that we arrange to try and make sure we get a best type scenario. I think it's huge. You always want to try where you can take the players out of their comfort zone where possible, so that you stretch them a little bit. You try and see how they are when they struggle. I think if you see the players always being in an environment where it's straightforward, they always do things well, I guess you never quite know how they'll cope when the game becomes difficult, because naturally our objective is always going to be, can we get the players to our first team? And that'll always bring different challenges, whether it be the challenge from the stands, which, from even just the general public who always expect Rangers to do certain, always expect them to do well. We always have to find a way to make sure our players have seen different scenarios and been challenged in different ways, so that when that challenge does come when they're older and it's more relevant in terms of the first team environment, then it's always good to find out how each of these players cope in those moments.
Great. So when you think back to being a kid, how did you get into football yourself? Was it the same story as most of us, playing with your mates, at school and in the street? Or?
Yeah, I think that you've just summed up, Don. My dad wasn't really into football. He became more interested in football as myself and my brothers were getting to that age of kind of 7, 8, 9, where it became, this was their life. It was pretty much that your day revolved around about having a ball under your arm and taking it out of the street and finding out who's ready to go and play. You go to school to play football before school starts, and in your head as school's going on, you're waiting for that bell to go, so you're playing football at the playground as well. And it just grew from that. I think, that was our biggest sort of driver as a kid. As soon as an opportunity to go outside and play football, and you remember as well, you played with so many. You remember that brand spanking new football was the best thing in the world, but it didn't take long for that ball to become what we best described as a tatty. And that's about it, but you still played. Whether it was the streets, whether it was the parks, and whether it was the school playground, that was just our motivation. It was just to get out and play football as often as you possibly could.
Yeah. And who influenced you? I know that's, and now we're talking as adults looking back, aren't we, about influencing, but at the time sometimes you're not aware of it until you reflect back. But who influenced you, in your youth career, about football or about life generally?
The natural thing is to go to your parents in terms of their support, and back then when you're a boys club player, you relied so much on your parents to get to where you need to be. I look at the support we provide to. I know parents do an awful lot for the players now, but I look at us as a club providing transport for players and different bits and pieces that we didn't have back then. You either could make it or you couldn't, which was naturally a challenge. I was fortunate that my dad was very supportive. My mum, obviously, very supportive in getting us. I'm saying us because I have two brothers. I had an older brother, year and a half older, the same as a younger brother, the same. So we were all interested in football. So we had that, which was great. Growing up, though, I think early on I quite quickly identified with an idol as such, and that was probably the bit in the back of my head. I wanted to be David Cooper. David Cooper was my role model. Fortunately, I met him as I got older, and he was getting to the last stage of his career as well. But he was the one that in my head that I wanted to be. So when we ran out in that playground or whatever, and people are shouting which player they wanted to be, I wanted to be David Cooper, and that's what I tried to replicate on the pitch. Unfortunately, I was never ever at that level, but to have that sort of person that you wanted to work towards being was probably the bit in my head that tried to. I was a left winger as a kid. No doubt, I didn't have the talent that probably needed to be a left winger, where you had to be that real one that could open teams up. As I got older and I started to become, from up until under 12s actually, probably quite a prominent sort of playing stage. I did quite well. I was quite quick. I could get away from players and scored a lot of goals as a result of that. As I got older, I found the stages of 12s to 16s quite challenging because I was always very small. So I relied on a lot of support, again, from family to help me through those stages. And it was only when I got to the stage of kind of 16, 17, 18, I actually found my way again in the game. And I found that actually there was probably 3 stages of my childhood as a footballer: doing well, struggling, and I felt the struggle was partly because of my size. But then as I tried to continue into the game, I couldn't be a left winger or a forward player because I couldn't influence the game the way I did. And I found that actually I had to rethink what I wanted to be as a footballer. And I ended up becoming a fullback, and I felt becoming a left back, actually, my understanding of the game was good. My use of the ball was pretty decent. I could cross, but I wasn't quick enough to get away from people the way I was when I was really young. So I almost rethought of how I influenced myself in the game. Alex McLeish became a big part of that because he was one that seen something in me as a fullback that he gave me an opportunity to be full time.
Was that at Motherwell then?
Yeah, I was at Motherwell, Donald. So he was big on that, because at that point, from 16s to 18, when your mates are getting the full time contract, I didn't get it at that stage. I ended up leaving school and waiting another year before I got that full time contract. So I was fortunate that Alex had seen something in me as a fullback that he felt he could work with. And I had 2 years at Motherwell, and that was probably the bit where I worked out what I was as a player. If I'm being honest, I really worked out where my strengths sat and where I could influence the game. And the areas also that I had to continue to learn if I wanted to still influence the game further, particularly in the kind of the senior side of the game. So yeah, there's different stages, different challenges. But I loved every minute of it, even though the challenging bits were there. I found that that was an area where I had to work out how to cope when it was much more difficult, because the first part of under 11s and 12s, it was straightforward. But then 13s, 14s, 15s, it became, wow, this is different, and I need to, if I want to keep playing this game, I need to deal with this and find a new way of playing.
You must have been, now, knowing you like I do, I see you coaching the whole time, and I think you're very thoughtful. You're a great coach, and you think about the game, and then you think communicate it. But from what you're saying there, you must have been like that as a player as well. You must have been quite thoughtful as a player to kind of see yourself kind of morphing back and working from your strengths. Were you aware you were doing that at the time?
Now I am.
Yeah.
Back then I wasn't. Back then it was because I think the game's changed an awful lot, Donald, because obviously you look back to the coaches that we worked with then, a lot of them are volunteers and didn't have the same support that we have now as coaches. So that naturally then transfers down to the players as well. And that's some great people growing up as a kid that spent a lot of time working with youth players and listen, let's be brutally honest, back then there was less thought about development. It was more about winning games. It was winning games at boys club, whatever age you were, winning games and winning trophies and all the different bits that came with that, and people enjoyed that. Can't lie about it either. They enjoyed that. I think the natural bit of wanting to win, but it was probably more evident then and more obvious. So I look back to, as people, the coaches were always good. I never had any issue with the coaches, and actually spoke to them to try and help finding a way to get into the game. But in terms of me, yeah, I think as I was going through that stage, it was probably when I got to the kind of 16, 17 stage, I started to work out probably what I was going to be. I didn't really know as I was finding those challenges at 13s, 14s. At that point, it's like a shock. You're going, how can I go from being a really prominent player to actually then not so much? And you're not growing. You know your mates who are 6 foot already at 14, 15 years old, and I'm still sitting as this wee guy working it. How can I not get away from him now? But then you start to kind of, realise that you can't do what you did, and you have to find a way of influencing the game. And I was always tight enough in terms of my use of the ball, but from a different area of the pitch now as I started to go back the way, as I say, towards full-back, which really came around about 16, 17.
You're, been working, with young players for a long time now, and at a high level, and we've seen it, and you've seen it, and I was speaking to a lot of the guys on the podcast. It's surprising, and maybe it's not as surprising, how many of them said they came through that period of, say, there's a period in their career, in their youth career, where things start to get sticky, either because of, you said, smaller in size, or other examples where they've had the growth spurts, and what they used to be able to do, they couldn't do, their balance goes. How important do you think it is as a player to be able to kind of come through those periods at a youth level?
I think everybody's journey is different, Donald. I think it's all right. People will find different challenges at different points, and what you can't do is tell them how to cope with it. You can you can only, I guess, from your own personal experiences, try and relate to it and give them support as a result of that. Will they benefit from having a challenge of that nature? Possibly, but some might not, Donald. I guess it comes down to that individual person. From your line of work, obviously, you'll recognise those that cope with those challenges well, and those that maybe have more difficulties. And the other bit that's huge is absolutely the support. Absolutely.
Well, that's what I was getting at, really. Is it's that bit about having people around you to get through that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, me and my dad, it's an interesting spell, because he probably found that spell more difficult than I did, because he found it hard to work out, probably more so because he didn't really have the football background. But he's since that stage he's been very involved in it. But I think back, and I speak to him now about it, and he found it difficult. And there's times if I wasn't playing, he would find it hard to stay around about the area of the pitch to watch, and because back then it was 3 subs, and they didn't all go on. Didn't all go on, and therefore it was pretty much the same ones every week. And I look now, certainly, we have a kind of procedure that we try and follow up to certain stages to ensure that there's relevant time being offered to the players, and it does change as you get older, of course it does. But I think the support of particularly your parents is huge, because they're the ones you go home to, they're the ones that you spend most time with as a football coach. In comparison, obviously, to parents, it's a very small percentage of time that you have with those players. So you're hoping that the support in and around the house and the friends are there to try and make sure that they can pick them up when the difficult spells are taking place.
And at what point, dear, did you take an interest in coaching? Because even speaking to you now, you were, when you're playing at a young age, you had a good awareness of the game and your strengths and weaknesses, what was happening. When did you find yourself consciously taking an interest in the coaching side?
I didn't, Donald.
You didn't?
I didn't.
Yeah.
So I think that quickly, to try and shorten the story, I've had too many operations in my right knee. So from the age of 16 through to 24, which was, I guess, you're sort of building from boys club football to professional. I had 5 operations in that spell, and it was getting to a point where I was training or playing on a Saturday or whatever the game was, and I was still struggling 4 or 5 days into the after the game, and I was training once and then playing again. So in my head, I knew my time was starting to change in terms of having a professional career. I built a different career pathway as a driving instructor, as it turned out, because I wanted to prolong my playing career as long as I could, knowing that it was always going to be at a certain level. I got a chance to, when I left Partick Thistle, where it was probably the most successful spell in terms of winning things, we got promotion 2 years out of 2 to go from League 2, second division up to the Premiership. But I went to Queen's Park off the back of that, because I knew my knee was struggling. Partick Thistle had got to the Premier Division, so I was never going to play there in the back of where I was. So I went to Queen's Park to get the chance to play at Hampden Park every second week because I thought,
Brilliant.
if I'm going to stop playing soon, then I quite fancy that because it's a wonderful place to play. It was excellent. So it was probably the biggest decision that I made, because by going there, I played for a year and a half. Billy Stamp became the manager. I basically went for an operation, and I knew when I went this was going to be probably a difficult outcome. I then was taken into the office the day after to be told that, look, you really need to stop playing, because if you continue to play, you're going to struggle to walk after whatever amount of years. So the decision was taken from me. That's what was going to happen. But stopping at Queen's Park as a player was the best thing that happened to me, because the support that I had there was second to none. And Billy there, obviously, who was a big influence, albeit over a short spell from a playing manager's point of view, because obviously he was the manager and I was a player at that point, and a short spell working with him, but then working with him as a coach was a good learning curve for me. Andy McGlennon was there at the time as well, who was also very much at the back end of trying to support me, because the two of them obviously got together and said, look, David stopped playing, what do we think? Is there a career from here? And they came to me and offered me an avenue that I'd never thought about.
Right, so it was just that you hadn't thought of it, kind of, and then just...
Right place, right time, Donald.
Right.
That was the only way to describe it. And the support that I got from those guys and then from others within the club, and the club themselves in terms of my coach education pathway, allowing me to go and work with Northern Ireland under 19s during my working spell with Queen's Park as well, because they allowed me to take time off to go and do that. So there's a lot of different things in there that the club gave and supported me that I just hadn't thought about.
Queen's Park have a great reputation for developing players there. What do you think it is about the club there that works? Well,
I think at the time, again, I'm going to go back to my experience, because obviously I don't know before and I don't know so much where it is now. But my time, again, it's just the people that were there. The motivation's different. So at that point, they were amateur. It wasn't driven by making money. But through a period of time, I've seen players develop and move on to have very successful careers within the game as a player. They've also had, previous people there that have been players or coaches that have moved on again, had good careers as coaches at various levels of Scottish game, and indeed, worldwide as well. You look at Neil Collins, as a former Queen's Park player, is now out working in the States. It's just it's a club that, from my experience, prided themselves on support and developing. And I can only speak highly of what happened from my individual pathway. And I like to think that players that through the time that I was there, and certainly I don't mean through myself, through the group of people we had at my time as head of youth when I was there, you look at them, you like to hope they would look back and talk about their experiences. Queen's Park has been quite influential, and if not only what they are as players, but certainly what they are as people.
I think there's a great just when you're speaking there, and I think about Queen's Park and think about it, there's a great humility about it, I think, and because you never hear, them saying, "Oh, we did this" or "we did that," everything, isn't it? I think that's it's there to support people, I think, and that's,
absolutely. And I'm from different. I mean, at my time, obviously, when I stopped playing, I was under 17s coach for 6 months. So just slightly longer, 6 months. That was from October through till the end of that season. And then Billy had asked me if I wanted to get involved as his assistant with the first team, which was great, because I'm 24 or 25 at that point, Donald, and I'm working in the first team environment, working with players at 34, 35. So you're working with players that are 10 years older than you, guys that have played at some real good levels. I look at back Paul Harvey, who had spent some time at Manchester United, and played with Motherwell first team, etc. So you're working with players as a 24-year-old coach, with guys who are coming towards the end stage of their career. So you're kind of, I look at that, and then that was a great learning curve for me, because I'm working with Billy. And one of the best pieces of advice that Billy gave me, out with all the different personal touches in terms of understanding how you coach within the game as well, was to find my voice as a coach. So it's almost like, you might believe what you say, but if you don't deliver it in a manner in which you believe it, then the players won't believe you. So that was one of the pieces of advice that I always found that stuck with me. That whenever I'm coaching, is to really, if you deliver the message that you believe in a way that players hear you, then the more chances, the more likely they'll kind of go with you at the same time as well. So that was a big part as well. I then went to the head of youth at Queen's Park for 5 seasons, which was different now because I'm then working with, that was a full-time job for me. I've got a group of 20 plus coaches or different staff members that I'm managing who are volunteers. So none of them get paid. So you're trying to then find the right people, find the right skill level of people, support them in their coaching pathway in terms of their education as well. So you're trying to bring all that together and still meet criteria set by the SFA. Because you must have certain level of qualifications, etc., etc. So that was a difficult, but a great learning curve for me as an individual, not even from a football perspective, from just a management perspective.
Have you, and now you're at Rangers, and that's journey in relatively a short time, you've taken in a lot of coaching and seen, from someone outside the game, someone who's looking at the game just now, I think a lot of people would say that the game's changed. That's why I hear a lot of people say, oh, it's changed, or it's got more complicated, or they're making it too fancy. Do you see the game changing as a coach in the middle of developing young players, David, in any way?
Yeah, I think people change, Donald.
Yeah.
And because people have changed and society's changed, then it naturally has an impact. And I don't think it's just football. I think it's every working environment now, I think there's a different way of working with people, which naturally then brings a change to the job that you're doing as well. So even in my time as a coach starting out to now, I think people are a little, I think they probably want more information from you. So we can always refer back to here's what we did and here's what I was taught, and some of that will still stand. I mean, values and just morals and humility, I think are traits that you hope many people have. But I do think that the way we coach is different now. And people will argue that we maybe give too much, but I think sometimes, unfortunately, you have to give what people need. And we've now got skills and skill sets and technology that we can use to support that. And I look at now, working with players, they almost crave more from you. But equally, we still have to try and give them the opportunity to make a mistake at the same time. So we can't tell them, and then assume that they know. Because if we keep telling them, then all they're doing is showing you what you know. I think there's a bit where you have to step back and almost allow them to make a mistake, and then try and support them through that mistake sort of situation. Especially working in youth development. I'm working under 18s and 16s. These guys will make mistakes. How we speak to them certainly changed. Because previously, when these guys made mistakes, it could have been a little bit sterner in the way that they're spoken to. But now we have to speak to them in a way to try and almost make it okay, so you've made that, so what would you have done differently? How would you look at it again? And try and go down more of a Q&A type scenario, and try and work out what they know before we get to a point of saying, okay, right, I hear you now, and then we start going down the route of what outcome we would like to go on.
We were speaking earlier about, players and players being patient for getting their opportunity wherever it is. Do you think the same's true for a coach now more than ever in terms of just understanding people and being able to have patience with a player getting them to where you want them to be within a team?
Yeah, absolutely, Donald. But again, I'll probably get back to it as a coach. It's similar, I guess each person's journey will be different, and how they get to where they want to get to will be different, and for different reasons. So as a coach, if we're working with a player, then there's no doubt that we have to show more patience for a lot of them to try and make sure they still get to the best possible outcome. But as a coach, it's similar, isn't it? Because some coaches have got real drive and determination to get to the very whatever they determine to be the top level. Because again, everybody's coach's aspirations will be different as well, and some will get there really quickly. Some might need to go a different route to get to the desired outcome. So I think you as an individual still having the drive, because the drive will help you get an ambition and the goal, the target. But there's probably patience will be required, because it won't just happen like that. It won't just happen like that. So there's got to be a bit of patience in there as well. Probably the frustration for those that have those targets is that they might see somebody else get to where they want to get to quicker than what they have, and that's probably the bit that kind of upsets the apple cart a little bit. But again, it's back. The industry we're in, Donald, is so different. It's so different. It takes somebody just taking a liking to what you are as a person and what attributes and skill sets that you have that can then go and support or enhance whatever programme they're running.
Yeah. It's interesting there, isn't it? Because when you're speaking, I'm thinking, that whole concept of flow, as a player, when you're just, and I always think of flow as like when you're a kid and you're playing in the street and your mom has to shout you in because you lose time, because you're just caught in it. But, as a player, there's those moments, isn't it, where everything's just, you're on fire and you're not thinking about it, you're seeing and doing. But then it's gone and you're forcing your way back into it. I often think as a coach, there's moments like that as well, isn't it, where everything comes together. And
I thought it was more obvious as a player, that flow as you're describing. But you're right, as a coach, you still have those moments, and it's when you get it, it's trying to keep your finger on it, isn't it? It's trying to work out, and it's almost taking a step back from what you're doing and actually working out what did you do then that actually got you the outcomes that you've got, and again the question is, what you did then, is it still relevant or has it changed?
See, I think that's a great question, and that's where I was getting at, is in terms of a coach, isn't it? Where you'll have one group of players, and then everything just seems to be working right, and a lot of them move on, and a new group comes in, and everything's changed again. Absolutely, it stops working.
And I remember I think it was in the pro license. We got asked that question of, okay, how do you see your job as a coach in the year 2030? And who would have back in 2010 or 2000 looked at 2020 and work out, what we're doing now in terms of what we're using technology-wise and different bits and pieces. So I even look at the lockdown spell, Donald, as a coach. And I remember us getting to the point where we recognised that we were going to go through a pause in what we were doing, but we didn't know how long it was going to be. But right away, we had a week of planning and as a small group of staff to work out how we could still impact the players during this spell. So we're doing things now, Donald, that I didn't know how to do. And it's not, I knew how to work with a computer, but I didn't know how I could work with players remotely so easy as what we're doing now. But we'd learn so quickly. Because if we didn't, we'd effectively lose contact time with players to try and keep their development progressing. So, I think it's just what we're describing there. It's what's relevant and what's still relevant. It could be that the players, as you've described, the group of players have moved on, so there's a new group coming in. So not only does that mean that the football has changed, but the person's changed. So actually, what are these people like now, as well as what type of player are they, and how you can then influence them at the same time. So as that time keeps passing by, so long as he's an under-18 coach at Rangers, time will evolve, players will move on, and I'll have to think of or find new ways to work with the new groups as they come through. And it's not easy, but it's something that's challenging, but that's part of keeping yourself. The best way to say it, as I said, is probably keeping yourself relevant.
I think that's a great way of keeping yourself relevant, because isn't it? It's a cliche, but it's true, that thing about being open to change, because now's the best example ever. I know we're slightly coming out of it, but nothing will be the same.
No.
That's it, moved. Things have shifted.
Absolutely. I think that's the most important bit, that if you always did what you always did, then sometimes that'll be successful, but there'll come a point where what you always did will need to change because the success changes.
When you look at your coaching career so far, what is some of, I suppose, the highlights for you? And I think it's why it would be useful would be for, I often think as a youth coach, one of the hardest things to do is often your successes or perceived success would be, for other people, would be away in the future. Someone might make it to the first team 5 years after they've moved on from you, or 4 years, or so or grading or having a sense of what you're doing, I think is quite hard, and it takes a special type of person to be good at that. What would be some of your, I suppose, highlight reels for coaching? And it doesn't have to be winning things like that. Is what gives you the most pleasure?
I think any coach that's in this job, if they didn't have the target of player development as they're kind of at the forefront of their mind, then it's probably not the right job for them, to be honest, because I think your job is to develop players. So when you see players find a way to have a career, ideally at the level that you're currently working at in the first instance. So if you look at yourself at Rangers and you see, like I said, Nathan Patterson getting opportunities just now. I see James Maxwell playing the other night, Lewis Mayo, Jamie Burjonis. you see all these guys getting the chance to play with the first team. That's got to be something that puts a smile on a coach's face, because then you see that what they've done and what they're doing is getting recognised by the first team staff, and that's ultimately got to be your goal. You see, listen, the Queen's Park, but there's a number of players that spell clearly, and I always remember that really, really sort of vividly in my mind, because we're a third division team, or a League 3 team in the Scottish sort of setup, but as an academy, they were competing, participating at what was considered the kind of top level of it. And then you look at the back of that, you look at some of the players that come out of that programme that went on and had, Andy Robertson's an easy one to speak about and what he's achieved. Barry Douglas is another one who has just won. They won the championship with Wolves and got promoted to the Premiership. He's now done the same with Leeds United. And you've got Lawrence Shankland, you've got Aidan Conley, you've got Blair Spittle. So these are the ones that clearly make, put the smile on your face, and that's got to be the biggest driver for what you do. From a personal point of view, you obviously working your way through your qualifications is a big part of the journey, because without the qualifications you can't do the jobs. And by doing the courses, they certainly had an impact on how I tried to progress and develop. But through the journey, you also bring in other things as well, by working with different people in different areas, working in different environments, by going to this is the bit where I'm really fortunate at Rangers, because we get so much opportunity to go and coach against different teams in different countries, and find out if your methods and styles that we have as a club and academy can actually be effective in different environments as well. So that's always something that I find, that very worthwhile and very, very beneficial for me as a coach. So yeah, I look at where we've been as a Rangers academy: South Africa, Hong Kong, Qatar, all over the, effectively the world in many ways. And that helps to challenge me as an individual as well.
If, we touched on it earlier, David, and just to finish, would be, what advice would you give? And I know you're a humble guy, and you wouldn't say to people, do this or do that. But one of the things I notice, I think coaching as a career now is far more prevalent earlier. So people are looked to say, I want to make coaching my profession, far earlier than they ever did. What would be your advice to someone either coming out from playing, or maybe actually at 16, 17 thinking, I want to be a football coach? What kind of guidance or advice would you say to them broadly?
That is really, really difficult, Donald, to actually work out, because again it goes back to similar to the player, everybody's journey is going to be different. If I look at, you obviously talking about youngsters, I think it's very worthwhile for, I even look at some of our players, it's very worthwhile potentially for them to start looking at their coaching pathway, because it might help them look at the game a little bit differently and start to understand what we have to think about it from a coaching perspective. I think probably a lot of the things is just to be so open to crave information, get to work out what people, how other people work out what works for you, because what works for me, Donald, isn't necessarily going to be the case for yourself. And I think it's that bit of just taking as much as you possibly can, being respectful that what might work for me doesn't work for you, but still not dismissing the fact that is still somebody's way of going to get to where they've got to. I think being brave is probably a big bit as well. Brave, what I mean by that is, now I look at my journey, I didn't really take any great risks in the sense of moving away, trying a different country or whatever it may be. But I think sometimes you go to a different country, sometimes opportunities might open up quicker. And I don't know if it's a British culture that sometimes that maybe opportunities maybe don't open up so quickly or so easily. But I've seen other people go to other countries and progress within their pathway, maybe a little bit different, a little bit quicker. And I think probably trying to be creative. So try not to continue to be, well, this is what I've always done. Try and be creative and try and look for things that are different and try and bring that to your sort of skill set. So a few different things in there.
A few different things there. And I ask you that because I've noticed I've been doing, especially involved in the coach education, quite a while now. And I notice people getting into it far younger now. And I think it's a good thing, isn't it? It's a good thing just to, even if a player, to open your mind and look at the game, but also, like, as you said there, be brave to do different things, or take a session at your club, or do things like that. So
I look at, in my journey from Queen's Park as a head of youth, I had a short spell at the SFA working with Parky and Fleets, which was 3 months, and it was only 3 months, not because of anything other than I got the opportunity. I went to the SFA and I was looking forward to working then within the coach education department. And that, for me, to leave Queen's Park, which at that time would have been considered a safe job for me. But I looked at it and I thought, okay, what's the next step for me? And I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but Parky and Fleets were really, keen and sold me what the opportunity might have been with them. But within 2 months, I got the opportunity to go to Rangers with Craig. And again, I could have stayed with SFA and take what might, again, could have been considered a safe option because of I'd just taken on the role. Parky and Fleets made it clear they wanted me to work with them. And I'm not sure what that job might have became because it's very much in its infancy. But when Rangers came calling, if I didn't take that, I don't know when does that opportunity come up again? Because I've got a wonderful job working in an unbelievable facility with great people, with some of the best players in the country. If I didn't take that opportunity, when would it have come up?
I know.
And that was my brave step, I guess, to move out of what might have been a comfort zone, and an environment that was going to be scrutinised probably more regularly, more often, because of what levels we have to try and achieve as an academy. And I don't mean achieve by winning things. Winning things is nice, but in terms of producing players, you're getting scrutinised in that because we need to try and develop players. And it was a brave decision at that point in the sense of I moved out of comfort zone, but the right decision because I'm working at such a great place with great people, with some great players, and hopefully continue to go in the right direction.
Brilliant, Dave. So thanks for taking the time to speak to me, David, and I'll see you soon.
Cheers, Donald. Thanks for that.
Cheers.